Okay, great. Looks like we have most people are fully admitted into the room. So just again, want to welcome you. Thank you for joining me today for this masterclass, which is hosted by myself from the University of Missouri in collaboration with the student world. The topic for our masterclass is medical education in the US and alternative options. I will be presenting a lot of different information here today. And I will leave time at the end for questions and answers. So you are welcome to put that in the chat. Please know that while I'm presenting, I will be monitoring that chat, but I will be answering most questions at the end of the presentation. I'm also joined here today by my colleague, Portia, who's also from the University of Missouri, who's just kind of helping to run the tech side of things and make sure that people are able to get admitted into this presentation. So thanks for joining us both. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the content. So beginning with introductions, my name is Shannon O'Hagan, and I am the Assistant Director of International Recruitment at the University of Missouri. So I work in our Office of International Admissions, which supports international students from around the world who are applying to the University of Missouri for bachelor's degree programs. So we are a great campus. We're located centrally in the US in Columbia, Missouri, and I'll share a little bit of information about my university later. But the main part of the presentation is actually general information that is not specific to my university, and is for students considering any university in the US. Why I was selected for this particular presentation is because of both my current and past experience. And so I do work with students from around the world who are considering study in the US. So I am familiar with the process for international students who are looking to study any number of degree programs. But in addition to that, I have a little bit of a unique background in that I also have experience with graduate medical education. Prior to my role here at the University of Missouri, I was a residency coordinator for a general surgery program where I coordinated a program for 28 physicians in training who are doing their residency and gained some really great experience through that. So I have kind of a unique perspective of understanding that process of people who are pursuing a career in medical studies, medical education. And I've also worked for a couple other universities similar to my current role, who are international students, again, applying to different US universities. And so I have some different perspectives on this process that's not just specific to my current institution. So that's kind of my background and experience and what's kind of informing my perspective on this particular topic. And I will share some examples from my current institution, Mizzou, but again, this information really is helpful even if you're considering any university in the US. So to kind of start with the topic, I think it's important to understand why we're talking about this particular area. And the reason for that is that I understand that medicine is a very popular area of interest for students around the world, certainly. And it's one that it works a bit differently in the US. So I wanted to explain to you all how it's different and help you to understand that process so that you're better informed in your choices. Medicine in the US is not offered as a bachelor's degree program. Instead, you study something else as a bachelor's degree program, and then you study medicine after earning a bachelor's degree. So the process is very different, and I'm going to talk about what that process looks like and some of the things you'll want to consider, especially as an international student. So understanding the actual path to becoming a medical doctor, a practicing physician, is an important part as you are considering this path and this journey. So in the US, as I mentioned, medicine is not a bachelor's degree. So you must first earn a 4-year bachelor's degree and then apply to medical school. So after a bachelor's degree, medical school is approximately 4 years. After studying medical school, you then go on to residency, which is where you pursue your particular specialization. So for example, after medical school, you earn your degree as, for example, an MD, a Doctor of Medicine. And then in residency, you continue your training to go into something like family medicine or general surgery. After residency, you can then become a practicing physician after passing your boards or obtaining your licensure. But some students will then continue on their studies into a fellowship program to have additional specialization. So one example of that would be if you decide to be a surgeon, your residency program would be 5 years of training after medical school. And then you might decide you want to go into a subspecialty. So for example, vascular surgery or plastic surgery or minimally invasive surgery. And all of those fellowship programs can vary from 1 year to 3 years. So all told, you're looking at a much longer educational path, in which case we're looking at 11 to 18 years of study and training after high school. So that path, again, is a little different in the US than what you see around the world. So it's just important to realize that that looks a little bit different than some of the other systems that you will encounter internationally. And one of the things that students often ask us about is, are international students even eligible to pursue medicine in the US? And the short answer is yes, but the truth is that it's complicated. There's kind of some bad news and good news when it comes to studying medicine in the US for international students. The bad news is that it's very challenging for international students due to some specific barriers and challenges that you are faced with. One of those challenges is just due to sheer capacity. We know that there are talented internationals from around the world who certainly are capable of practicing medicine. So it's not a matter of ability, but it is an issue with capacity. In the US, there's a very limited number of spaces available to become a student in a school of medicine. So medical schools have a limited number of seats available. Meanwhile, there is a shortage of physicians in the US, and so there is a priority to train more medical doctors. And so the medical schools around the US often prioritize US students for the limited number of seats available. So what you want to think about when you're considering this path is kind of what your chances are, not just in ability, but also in sheer numbers and capacity. So I'll break down some of those numbers. That is honestly probably one of the biggest hurdles is just that the sheer numbers that are available for students and whether or not it's a realistic path for you. So I don't tell you this to discourage you or scare you away, but just to make you aware of what the realistic path looks like for you when you're continuing in these studies. So you might be thinking, okay, sure, it's challenging. There's a limited number of seats available, but I'm a great student and this is what I want to do. And I'm very passionate about medicine and I know it's what I want. And so I want to kind of break down some numbers for you so you can get an idea of what it looks like for you. So if you're looking at MD programs, and these are Doctor of Medicine programs that are through the Association of American Medical Colleges. So this is kind of your most common type of medical school program in the US. Overall, you'll see that there are 155 different US medical schools. Of those, 43 will accept international applicants, 15 public and 28 private. And this is as of the current application cycle. So about 28%. So not great, but not terrible. But I do have an asterisk here as far as that 43 number, because 43 will accept applicants, but some of those have caveats when you look more closely at their admission requirements. Some of them will accept applicants, but they still will need to prioritize US applicants. When you're talking about public universities, sometimes it's even more challenging. The reason for this is because public universities receive at least some of their funding from the state in which they are located. So the state governments help to fund the institution. And because of that, they have to prioritize students from that state in the admission process because they want more physicians from that state to ultimately work as doctors. So again, 43 out of 155, but you'll need to do a little more research into seeing how many specifically you might qualify for. So let's get a little further into the numbers. In the most recent application cycle, you'll see that 1,844 international applicants ultimately applied for medical schools in the US. Of that, 276 matriculated. So this means 276 were ultimately admitted and enrolled in programs. How this compares to the overall numbers is that 53,000, a little more than that, applied, and 22,239 ultimately matriculated. So overall, you'll see the process is quite competitive for any applicant. But for international students, how that breaks down is that 1.2% of enrolled students in medical school programs are international. So not a great number, but again, not impossible. Another one to be aware of is when it comes to DO programs. So these are programs for osteopathic medicine. This is less common in the US, just percentage-wise, there's fewer of them available, fewer DO graduates than MD. So MD kind of is the majority of programs out there, but DO programs are growing. So as you see, there are 40 approximately osteopathic medical schools in the US, and of those 17 accept international applicants. So percentage-wise, a higher number. But with that same asterisk that you would have to look more closely to see what that looks like in terms of their specific admission criteria and how they prioritize their applicants. So in the 2019 cycle, which is the last one that had information available, they had just 306 international applicants. So a little over 1%, about 1.5%. But of those, 218 were Canadian citizens. So really you're looking at very few international students who pursue a DO path. And in the overall numbers, you'll see that just comparatively to MD programs, just smaller overall. So for these, they had 21,584 applicants in the overall pool and just 7,672 total seats available. So all of this goes to show that it is a challenging path to pursue. It is a very competitive process to pursue medicine in the US. And it's especially challenging for international students because there are so few seats available. Another hurdle to go into, as I just pile on the bad news, is when it comes to the actual cost of medical education in the US. As you see here, the median cost of attendance to go to a four-year medical school program is $272,000 USD. And so the important thing that's often asked is, what about, scholarships? Do programs offer scholarships? And the answer is, well, yes, many programs do have some funding available to students. It varies whether or not international students are eligible for those scholarships. But even with scholarships, the median debt that students take on by going to medical school is $200,000 USD. So that gap between cost of attendance and scholarships is quite large, and that you still are taking on a lot of the expense yourself. So the vast majority of students will need to take out loans in order to pay for medical education. So 73% actually, as you see here, do graduate medical school with debt, and that median debt being $200,000. So it's very expensive. Medical education in general is expensive to for a university, for medical school to carry out. So the curriculum, all the training, it's just an expensive program. And a lot of times students have to be involved in paying for those expenses. So how, you might be wondering, well, how do students in the US do this? How do they graduate with so much debt? And a lot of times students will take out loans. A lot of times those loans are through the federal government. And so because they'll ultimately be able to pay back the loans once they become a practicing physician. And there's also some federal forgiveness programs for those loans. Unfortunately, international students studying on your typical F1 visa are not eligible for federal loans. So you would need to be expecting to pay your own finances for this. So if your own savings or your family savings, or finding your own private loans to pay for this cost of attendance. So with those news in mind, I think what's helpful is to talk about, okay, so what options are available? The good news is that, there are options for you to consider. I wanted to lay out all of the bad news first so that now we can talk about if not solutions, at least different paths that you might have available. So here we're going to talk about 3 different scenarios. There's 5 doors just because, you know, the picture had 5 doors, also because you'll find more paths than those that I outlined. But we'll start with this first scenario here. And scenario 1 would be for students who are still determined to beat the odds and to study medicine in the US. So I've just, scared you away with all of the challenges when it comes to capacity as well as to finances, but you think that you're in that 1% that really can do this. And so I say, great, I encourage you to pursue those dreams. And if you do want to follow that path, I want to talk about some things that you'll want to consider. The first thing is to do your research. And so I've shared some basic facts and figures from you from some of these professional organizations or some of the organizations that oversee medical schools in the US. And these are great resources for you to continue to explore. And I will provide a slide at the end where I list links to different resources. So with these reports that they have available, you can dig a little bit further to get more insight onto the typical profile of students who are admitted to medical schools in the US. You can start researching now which medical programs do accept international students and what they're looking for in a candidate so that you can be strategic in your bachelor's degree program to be a strong candidate at the end of your studies when you are ultimately applying to a medical school program. The other thing to keep in mind is that you would be, of course, choosing what bachelor's degree you want to pursue. And this is another question or kind of misunderstanding about US higher education. Because as I mentioned, medicine is not offered as a bachelor's degree in the US. So students will often say, so what do I study? And the answer, as with many things in the US, is it depends, or it's kind of up to you, because medical schools in the US do not have a specific requirement for which program you need to study as a bachelor's degree. They will look for students from any major, actually, as long as they meet some criteria when it comes to taking courses in sciences and labs. And so a lot of times medical schools will outline the different types of coursework you need to take, but the specific degree can vary. Many students will still choose a program in the life sciences because that might be their interest area and because that can help to prepare you with the type of coursework to ultimately do well in medical school. But it really varies. To give you an example of this, when I was working with the residency program, one of the physicians who was a faculty member in our program, who was, he was a surgeon, and I think his primary major, or what he primarily studied, was something in the life sciences, but he was also very interested in art. And so he had a passion for art, so he also studied art as part of his undergraduate studies. And then his whole office was decorated in the art that he had made himself. So he kind of had those dual interests. And that's something that he continued through his studies as well as in his personal life, even as a practicing physician and surgeon. So it's okay if you have more than one area of interest, or if you have an interest in an area that's not traditionally a medical or life sciences related field. That said, a lot of students do choose something in that area because they like science, and it's something that might help to prepare you long-term with the knowledge or background to be successful in medical school. Now, you might have heard a term used that's called pre-med or pre-medicine. And we have a lot of students ask about pre-med as a major. So they want to say, like, I want to ultimately go to medical school. I know that I have to earn a bachelor's degree first, so I want to study pre-med. Well, pre-med is not an actual major in the US. It is an advising track. So the difference here is that you don't earn a degree in pre-med. Any student in any major can be a pre-med or a pre-medical student. This advising track is for students who indicate that they're interested in ultimately going to medical school. So you receive special advising to help make sure you're on track to meet the requirements to apply to medical school and gain the types of experiences that will help you stand out as an applicant when you ultimately do decide to continue on to your medical studies. Now, to give you an example of what that looks like, I provided some information about MedopAdvising at my university, Mizzou. And so our MedopAdvising office works with students in any kind of track where it is a professional degree program. So whether that be pre-medicine or pre-dentistry, pre-podiatry, pre-pharmacy. And so they help students to take through the courses that they'll need to be strong candidates for, in this case, medical school. They also host a variety of workshops and programs to help you to kind of know more information about the path, to gain insight on people who work in that profession. And ultimately, when it comes time to apply, they'll provide a lot of support for you in that process. So whether that is interview prep or help with the actual application process, they're there to kind of be your guide and to help you in that overall process. We also have a pre-medical society at Mizzou, and this is a student organization that students can join for anyone who's interested in ultimately pursuing a medical degree program. And this is another great way to connect with other students who have that shared interest, who are very oftentimes academically focused on this path, since it is challenging whether you're US or international, and to kind of gain exposure to different medical schools and different physicians or other professional fields so that you can kind of begin that networking and understanding of opportunities available to you. So these are examples specific to my university, and I think this is something we do quite well. But you will find similar programs at other universities in the US where as a pre-med student, access to these different types of resources to support you throughout your bachelor's studies. I just received a notification that my internet's a little unstable, so apologies if I've been cutting out a little bit. All right, now we will go on to scenario number 2. So scenario number 2 is for students who decide that studying medicine in the US is not for them, and they want to study medicine internationally. To that, I say, great, there's options for you as well. So attending medical school outside of the US is a great option for many people. And of course, there's many options to research for that. And so of course, as with anything else, you should do your homework, do your research to find a program that is going to be a good fit for you and your long-term career goals. If you decide to attend medical school outside the US, that does not necessarily mean you can't still come to the US and gain some medical related experience. There's a couple different ways that you might do that. So when you are a current medical school student studying internationally, you could consider a short-term elective program at a US medical school where you'll find any number of opportunities available. So some of these are doing an elective rotation. Sometimes it's doing a summer research program. Sometimes it's a structured program between medical school internationally and a medical school in the US, similar to a study abroad type program. And you will find a lot of these different opportunities listed at the resource that I have posted here on this slide. So that is the Visiting Student Learning Opportunities, or VSLO program, through the AAMC, so the American Association of Medical Colleges. And I'll provide a link to that at the end. This is a great way for you to gain some exposure and experience to US medical education, even if you're studying in a different country. Another option for students to consider, which could be in addition to a short-term elective program, is to consider pursuing your residency program in the US. So you will find that there are many residency programs in the US who do accept international applicants. It's still a very competitive process to apply to residency programs. To give you an idea, when I worked with the general surgery residency program, we received somewhere around 800 applications to fill 5 spots for residents. So it is competitive, but with the way the process works, overall, statistically, your odds are a lot better at the residency level than they are at the medical school level. So a lot of times people will pursue this path, and this is something where, again, it's a part of researching your options, because the competitiveness and the spots or the capacity for international students in particular will vary by specialty. So you might find differences for a surgery program than, say, family medicine. So that's just something to consider as you explore different medical schools as well as residency programs. All right, now let's talk about scenario number 3. And this is for students who are a little bit open-minded in terms of the overall process goes. So maybe you think you want to be a medical physician, you want to practice medicine, but you're not 100% sure, or you're open to other possibilities. And so this doesn't mean that you can't still be pre-medicine. This doesn't mean that you can't be considering that path, but perhaps you think that there might be some other programs that are a good fit for you. In which case, I would say that there's many opportunities available. Here I've listed some of the programs in our School of Health Professions, just to give you an idea of some of the different paths that are still related to medical-related fields, still similar to the types of work that sometimes physicians do, or different aspects of medicine beyond the physician's role that you might consider. And this is for our School of Health Professions, so certainly there's more out there than what's listed here, but we have a good School of Health Professions, so I thought it would be helpful to see this example. So when you're looking at different programs in health professions, as you see at the bachelor's level, you have different options for what you might want to study depending on your interests. There's also often master's and doctoral programs. One thing I wanted to point out when it comes to health professions is that they do tend to be non-traditional compared to some of the other degree programs at a US university. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes at a US university, you are applying to your degree program. It's a 4-year bachelor's degree. At the end of it, you graduate with that degree, and then a lot of times you can work in your chosen field. In health professions, it varies. So for example, if you're interested in physical therapy, as you see that's listed as a doctoral degree program, this is something that's not determined necessarily by the university in terms of the credential you need, but by the licensing or governing body of that particular profession. So for physical therapy, for example, way back when, it used to be a bachelor's degree program. Then as the profession evolved and they realized people were needing more training than just a bachelor's program, it became a master's level program. And then in recent years, it's transitioned again to now being a doctoral degree program. So in order to become a physical therapist in the US, you have to earn a doctoral degree. What's a little bit non-traditional in terms of this process is that students can apply to a Doctor of Physical Therapy program after earning a bachelor's degree. So it's not that there's your typical bachelor, master, doctoral. It goes straight from bachelor to doctoral. So I use that as one example just to say that some of these health professions follow a non-traditional path. So it's not quite the same as medicine. It's not quite the same as your traditional degree programs in the US. So it does take a little bit more research on your part to learn a little bit more about what the degree programs mean and what that path is depending on your interest. To MD or DO programs in terms of capacity. So a lot of these programs, not to say that they're not difficult or challenging, but they don't present those same obstacles as the MD. And then I also wanted to provide you with some other related programs. So health professions, of course, is a great area to consider, but there's many programs that might align with your interests if you have kind of that interest in medical or helping professions. So some people might be more drawn, for example, to research. So maybe biological engineering, biomedical engineering could be something that's of interest to you. Or maybe you're interested in nursing or social work. And so you'll find that there are other programs beyond what you might initially think of or a physician. And so if you're not sure about which ones are for you, or if this makes you even more confused about what you want to do with your life, don't worry. Universities in the US, including at Mizzou, do have great academic advising to help you in this process. So no matter which of these programs you decide to pursue, you will have an academic advisor who can help you to select different courses to pursue these programs. You can also connect with career services to understand more about some of these different career pathways. And students in any major could also be pre-med students if you think that you might still want to ultimately pursue medicine. So you could still have that pre-med advising, still have your academic advising, still have career support to help you take different courses and gain different experiences to determine which program and which path is the best for you and your long-term goals. And then some students will ask, what about some of these other programs that might heard of? So dentistry, pharmacy, optometry, veterinary medicine, etc. Why these are kind of grouped together is because they are similar somewhat to the MD path or the DO path, in that they're not offered as a bachelor's degree in the US. They're similar that you have to earn a bachelor's degree first and then apply to these different schools. So these are all considered professional degrees and require licensure at the end of your studies to become practicing in that field. So how this works is that as a bachelor's degree student, it's similar that you can have any number of academic majors, and then you can have that pre-advising. So at Mizzou, for example, that MedopAdvising to help you to take coursework and gain experiences and work towards applying to these programs. The competitiveness for these programs will vary. The capacity issues, the cost issues that I talked about when it comes to medical school could be a factor in the overall process. But overall, in general, they're a little bit more open than pursuing medical education in the US. And so this is a list of resources that I have available. So you're welcome to kind of take a screenshot of this or maybe just make a mental note of some of these resources to take down. A big one I would say is if you are interested in pursuing medical education in the US, to check out the Association of American Medical Colleges, or AAMC. They do have a lot of great reports and statistical information out there so you can really dig in and learn more. They also have a database of different medical schools in the US where you can see the different programs available. You can filter for programs that admit international students, and then you can click on each one to learn more about the program and see what their requirements might be. Keeping in mind that for those of you who are currently in high school, you would not actually be applying to medical school until the end of your bachelor's degree program. So those requirements could change by then, but this can give you a better idea of what that path looks like and what those types of requirements might be when you are ultimately ready to pursue medical education. Some of the other ones that are great to check out would be, for example, that visiting student learning opportunities page if you're thinking about studying medical education outside the US, to get a feel for some of the different types of opportunities that are available and the different types of programs that host students. And then, of course, the MedopAdvising one is also great, the resource for our university. It has some general information about the path for students as well. So, for example, there's kind of a timeline to give you an idea of, as you are pursuing your bachelor's degree program, what to do at different phases. So kind of what to do in your first year, your second year, third year of study, and then your final year when you are making those applications. So with that, I did want to just very briefly introduce my university in case we have anyone else in the room who just wants to know a little bit more about our institution, and then I'll open it up to you guys for Q&A. But as I mentioned, I represent the University of Missouri, which is often called by our nickname Mizzou. So you've already heard me using that in the presentation interchangeably with the university. And we are located centrally in the US. So we are in the state of Missouri, which is gold on your map there. And we're located centrally within the state in the city of Columbia, which is a great college town that's consistently recognized as a top place to live. It's also known to be affordable, especially in comparison to some of the larger cities in the US and some more coastal regions. Academically at Mizzou, we have more than 300 degree programs from bachelor's through PhD. As you saw, some of those programs are certainly great when it comes to the different sciences as well as the health professions. So those are some great options to explore. We do have 31,000 students, including international students from more than 100 countries. So we're sorry, just got a little notification. So we're a nice, diverse campus community. And one of the things that we are especially known for is our hands-on learning experiences. So students in any major will find great opportunities to have hands-on learning experiences both inside the classroom and through experiences like research, internships, study abroad programs, and student competition groups. We also do have scholarships available to students that are automatic awards typically based on SAT or ACT scores. So that's just a really quick overview, some highlights about my institution. I encourage you to check it out if you are interested in learning more, but the main point of the presentation was to talk about medical education. So I do want to now reserve our remaining time to see if anyone has any questions for me. If you do, you're welcome to put those into the chat. So you can put that into the chat window. If you want to do so, you can also unmute yourself and ask questions that way. For those of you who have to drop off, I do want to thank you for joining us today. And with that, I'll turn it over to you for any questions.
So I happen to be one of the people you kind of briefly mentioned, what do you call it? A high school student. So you said that the rules may change in the future.
What I mean by that is that, yeah, if you're a current high school student, I mean, admission requirements can change in the future. So as you're exploring medical schools to ultimately apply for at the end of your degree program, that the ones you research now that list their specific admission requirements or say their percentage of perhaps, international applicants, that can change over the next 4 years. So just to know that preliminary research is great to get that information, but that it can change a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So someone has asked in the chat, if there are so many hurdles studying medicine in the US, why is it so attractive to the international community when there are, quote unquote, easier options in, for example, the UK? That's a great example. It's one where we're fortunate in that we do have a strong medical education curriculum, great opportunities there. And so honestly, I think part of it is just not having the full picture, which is why I wanted to do this presentation so that I can provide you all with a realistic overview or expectation of what those opportunities look like in the US. I think part of that also is that there are many students, either US or international, who in high school might think they know for sure they want to be a doctor. And then maybe when they start their bachelor's degree program, they discover that what they're really passionate is, say, biomedical engineering. And so they might change paths in that way. And the US provides flexibility for students who do change their mind or want to go into a different specialty or area. So I don't know for sure, the full answer to your story of, why some people are drawn to it or attracted when it is such a challenging path. But I think that that's at least part of it. It's just that strong reputation and the opportunity to kind of change your mind if you are interested in a different area. But I mean, I hope, if nothing else for you, that this does give you some insight into that path and gives you some idea of which of those might be a good option for you. You're welcome. But yeah, another good question has come in is if it's possible to take a major and a minor at Mizzou. The answer to that is yes. What that means for those of you who are not familiar is that a major is like your primary area of study. That's what your degree is going to be in. And then your minor is a secondary area of study. So it's kind of like a subspecialty. And so at Mizzou, we have many students who will pursue more than one area of study. So they will do a major and a minor, or even two majors or a major and two minors. Like you can kind of combine your studies depending on your interests. And that's something where your academic advisor can be great help to you to help you decide how to best combine your interests into degree programs and see what opportunities are available. So yes, that is certainly possible at Mizzou. That's something that's pretty common in the US overall, where students can have more than one area of study through a major and a minor combination. Great questions. Does anyone else have any questions for me? All right, I'm not seeing anything else come in. Certainly, I will hang out here for at least a few more minutes to see if anybody else has questions that you're welcome to, again, put in the chat or just stick around and ask me. For those of you who need to head out, I do want to thank you again for joining me today. I have provided our email address at the bottom of the screen. If you do have any more questions about the University of Missouri, perhaps you're interested in learning a little bit more about some of our bachelor's degree programs, I invite you to contact us, check us out. But once again, thank you all for joining us, and look forward to hearing from you soon.